My name is Mark De Bono, I run Cornered TV, and this is my 1991 Toyota MR2. And for me, this is the car that started it all. I had never really planned to get an MR2. It was always a car that was on my radar because I remember it from when I was a kid. I was about 5-6 years old when this MR2 came out of the factory. You don't find very many of these cars here in Malta. Although you can buy one from the UK for pretty cheap, you never really know what you're buying, and not physically being there when buying a car that's 30 years old, I found to be kind of daunting. So I pushed the MR2 to the back of my mind, never really looking for one. And for a while I was looking for an older Porsche. I was looking for a Porsche 944. I saw some really crappy cars, and again, not being that mechanically inclined, I decided I did not want this hassle. And I kind of kept saving up for something special that might come along, and I knew of this car. I knew this car very well because it belonged to one of my very best friends. He had owned it for 17 years, and I always thought, you know, Philip would never sell his MR2. I wouldn't even dream to ask because, well, he loved that car so much. He raced it in Sicily, he drove it quite regularly, and although he had quite a few cars at that point, I always thought that he'd never want to part with the MR2. I got in a few lifts in this car, so I had been in it and I was familiar with it, and I knew that it was in very good condition. Phil is extremely good around engines, and so I knew that this car was kept in very good repair and very much loved. And then came a point when Philip told me, I think I might sell the MR2. And I still didn't cotton on to the fact that maybe I'd buy this car. It still didn't seem conceivable to me that I would. All I told him was, before you sell it, please let me have a drive in it. I just like really to drive it before I never see it again. And he said, yeah, sure, it's going to be a while because it needs to be sprayed first. I'm not going to sell it as it is. Now it needs to be resprayed, and then I'll sell it with spray as new. And that was that.
Then I drove the MR2, and they're a whole lot of fun.
Get a great deal on all Toyota sports models now at your Northern California Toyota dealer. Now,
the sprayer that Philip engaged to do this was a very good sprayer, but he was doing it as a labor of love more than as a job that comes in and goes out as quickly as possible. So it took, I think, around a year before Phil basically sent me a text and told me, I need a lift. I need you to pick me up from somewhere and take me to the sprayer. And you can drive the MR2. And I'm like, okay, that's great. And so we drove to the sprayer, and inside the garage I see the MR2 with brand new spray, taped up everything still on it. Very few of the electricals were connected. Philip tosses me the key and tells me, yeah, let's take it for a drive. Let's see how it goes, that nothing rattles, so on. I start driving, and in about 10 minutes of driving or so, my heart was set. Then I told Philip, let's go grab a coffee. And we sat down for a coffee, and I told him, right, yeah, okay, I want it. Name your price. There was no shrewd negotiation whatsoever. Phil mentioned his price, and luckily for me, it was below what I was prepared to pay. So I agreed on the spot, and I basically sent a text to my girlfriend, I'm buying the MR2. So my MR2 is a 1991 model, and it is the middle child of the MR2 family. So you've got the AW11, which is a cute, boxy, mid-engined car, and it looks so good. I really like those cars. And then following my car, there is the Spider, the MRS, which is modeled on the Porsche Boxster and is the least favorite child of the family. I've never driven any other MR2 except my own, to be honest. So I have no idea how it compares to others, and I have no idea how it compares to its older sibling or to its younger sibling. What I do know is that my car came from Japan. It was bought from Japan and brought to Malta. What I also do know is that when Philip bought it, I don't know how many years ago, it was not in a great state. I mean, it was mechanically sound, but it was not very well taken care of. There was a motorcycle battery, and the engine wouldn't crank over. So it needed a bit of work. Philip drove it for a long time and he absolutely loved that car. He took the engine apart, rebuilt it, he did all kinds of things to that car. What's good about buying a car from a very good friend, especially a friend that's owned the car for 17 years and taken it apart, is that it comes with parts and it comes with knowledge. So that is a great advantage. And I have an extra engine rocker, I have an extra turbo for the car. I have so many extra things. There's an extra wing somewhere. Another positive is the knowledge, of course, that every time that something doesn't perform quite as I expect or quite as I am used to, first thing I do is send a text to Philip, is this normal? Meeting your heroes and kind of owning your dream car still comes with its own pitfalls, and that pitfall is finding out what you dislike about the car. For a start, my girlfriend hates it because it smells of petrol, the engine being right behind you, it's loud and it's hard. Other things I dislike about it is its fuel consumption. I mean, it can be driven economically, but I have other cars, so when I drive this car, I drive it for the occasion and I drive it for the fun of driving this car. I tend to drive in a more spirited fashion than is recommended by the user manual for optimum consumption. So it drinks petrol. Another thing I don't like all that much about this car is the ease of working. Yes, it's an old Toyota car, so for a start, it's bulletproof. But when you do need to work on it, it's extremely limited room available because the engine takes up a lot of space in the engine compartment in the middle of the car. For a lot of jobs, unless you can lift the car up, it's really, really difficult to even see what's going on. That leads me to my next dislike, which is it's kind of hard to find people that want to work on these cars. It's not that they're hard to work on. If you know your trade, they're not that hard, but it's harder to find people that really want to kind of spend a little more time going through the manuals and so on and understanding what's wrong with an older kind of car where you don't just plug it into the OBD2 and you get all of the diagnostics and everything that's wrong. Another con to owning a car from 1991 that's out of production is the availability of parts, of course, if something breaks. There are a lot of parts that you can buy new, but something as simple as the sun visors, for example. I've been to 2 pairs of sun visors already and I can't get a passenger sun visor to stay all the way up. These are the kind of cars that you sometimes consider buying another car just like it that maybe doesn't run, and taking it apart and keeping it just to cannibalize parts and panels off. Because if you're crashed into and you need a whole new side, it's going to be quite difficult to find replacements unless you can repair.
Track magazine says the MR2 resembles a scaled-down Ferrari.
And it performs like one, too.
So with all the great deals,
You just can't beat a Toyota.
the more you know, the more likely you'll buy it.
No power steering, no traction control, no anti-lock brakes, no nothing of that kind that interferes with your driver input, and that makes it a very, very feedback receptive kind of car. You feel the car constantly, you feel every single bump because it's hard, but also you understand exactly what your input is with your steering and so on. So that makes it a very, very unfiltered kind of drive. That makes it feel faster than it actually is. Although for a 29-year-old car, it is still quite fast, and it's quite satisfying to kind of leave someone behind at the lights. And then there's one thing that's kind of notorious to the SW20. There is such a thing known as snap oversteer, and the MR2 forums are ablaze with this kind of thing. It is a thing, yes, the car does snap oversteer if you lift off the throttle in the middle of a bend. This I found out the second time that I drove the car as a proud owner, and I thought that I'm going to take a whole side home in like bin bags or something. This is a car that you do need to learn to respect. I haven't really had big problems with snap oversteer except for that one time, but it can happen, yeah. You do need to pay attention and you do need to understand that this is an unassisted car, no traction control, no power steering, no nothing. So it's not that forgiving as a car. That's not necessarily a bad thing. That's actually one of the things that I like most about the car, is that it is completely unassisted.
Spring. Time of year when all I think about is cars, hot cars, MR2, Celicas, Paseos.
It's the Toyota Spring Drive Sales Event. It's on now at your Toyota dealer. And see the hot new MR2. It's time to get to your Toyota dealer.
I'm in love.
I know what you do for me.
I also like about this car the fact that it reminds me so much of my childhood in the 90s. It's kind of one of those cars of that era. Even people that are not car guys, they will look at the car kind of fondly and remember it's not a pretentious car, it's not a very expensive car. It's just maybe a throwback to the times when sports cars were simpler and attainable and purer. And of course, one of my favorite things about the car, as superficial as it is that it has pop-up headlights, which I just absolutely love. The look that kids give you when the pop-up headlights go up. Kids these days haven't seen pop-up headlights the way that people my age or older grew up with pop-up headlights. Now it is relatively in stock format. It's lowered slightly, it's got slightly stiffer suspensions, it's got the Recaro seats, although I've got the original ones, but they're not as good because they don't hug you in the corners. There's a couple of gauges that are not completely factory, but otherwise the car is essentially factory spec. I don't really have plans for the car. I mean, I barely wash it. I'll be honest, I much prefer driving the car to washing it. I only wash it when it gets super dirty, which doesn't happen very often because I don't like driving it in the rain because it slips about. But eventually I'd like to upgrade the wheels and get some NKRPF ones or something like that. I'm not sure about the color yet, maybe bronze, maybe white if I want to be cleaning them all the time. Maybe just go with black, I have no idea yet. When that happens, we will change all 4 corners of the tires because well, it would be better, and generally just tightening the interior up and sprucing it up, updating it a little bit maybe, but really nothing very major. I'll have the steering wheel restitched and that kind of thing, but mostly the car is as is, and I hope I'll never have to sell it. I hope I'll never be put in a position where I have to sell it, because although I have other cars and I'm not sure which is my favorite car, I really like this one. It's the car that I never really thought I'd have, and I still feel like sometimes I'm not supposed to have it, and I'm so super glad and happy every time I get to drive it and show it to a friend or take someone who hasn't been in it yet for a drive. It's a great fun car to have, and the fact that you can leave it in there for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 sometimes, and then you feel like a drive and you just go in and cranks immediately, starts up no problem. Toyota dependability. That's a really encouraging factor to keep owning this car forever.